So, Michelle, can you say hello?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so glad to be here.
Well,
So today I'm going to talk about authentic leadership. And I'm going to start by I'm starting with a different beginning than I anticipated. Yesterday, as I was putting together my final touches for things I wanted to talk about, I came across, someone sent me an article about the university that I went to that was incredibly disturbing. And normally, when I would do this type of introduction, I'd tell you I'm an attorney, I'm an executive coach, I'm a proud graduate of this university. And I really struggled with how I was going to do that. And for me, it highlighted the reason why having these conversations about authentic leadership are so important. As women, we face unique challenges, high expectations, demanding clients, pressure to prove ourselves, and all of the things that we do outside of our work week. So, what I'm hoping that you are going to gain in this session are strategies to embrace your authentic leadership. Not every day is going to be pretty. Some days there are going to be amazing highs, devastating lows, but hopefully you are going to get some key takeaways to how to keep your authenticity the entire time you are in a leadership position, and remembering you are the only you there is. You are beautiful, you are unique, you have something of value to give to the world, and don't let anybody else dim your sparkle. So, a little bit more of my origin story. In 2019, my entire life changed. I got a divorced, my mother died, there were some, other family members who died, sold the house after the divorce, and then COVID hit. So the pause for COVID for me was life-changing because before that point, I was so proud of my ability to be the chaos coordinator and handle everything that got thrown at me. What I didn't realize is that I was heading for burnout, and that worldwide pause forced me to re-examine who I really was, what was really important to me, and how do we move forward from there. So let's do some level setting and talk about what is authentic leadership. Right? It's leading with integrity, self-awareness, and consistency with your values. One, you step into who you are and you are unafraid to be exactly who you are across all spheres of your life. Work-life integration becomes a little bit easier because you have established this is who I am, this is how I show up, these are the things that are important to me. When you show up as an authentic leader, the impact on teams and organizations gets amplified. When you show up as your most authentic self, you give your team members permission to also show up in that same way. Why does authenticity matter? Well, how many times have you let the pressure to meet others' expectations hamper what you wanted and what was in your best interest? How many times did you sacrifice your well-being to meet some stereotype or some model that the workplace tried to force on you? So it matters to protect women leaders' health and ability and desire to remain in the workforce. Sometimes it propels us to be entrepreneurs. When you say, I'm tired of being forced into this box, so I'm going to change. I can't change anyone else around me. I can change myself. And I'm not living my best life and being my most authentic self. Right? Other people's reactions do not define your value. So don't let people who you don't care about all that much, if you get real and honest with yourself, control you and let you show up in a way that you feel you have to compromise something. So how do we get to set a foundation for authentic leadership? Well, the first piece of that is self-awareness. This is the hardest piece because it means getting honest with ourselves about any of the dark, twisty, ugly things that we don't necessarily like. Are we self-aware enough to realize how we show up in certain places? Shirzad Shamin in Positive Intelligence talks about your saboteurs and then turning those on their head to get to your sage powers. So everyone's biggest saboteur is the judge, judging ourselves, judging others, judging the situation. But then those judges have accomplice saboteurs. Some of us become victims. Some of us become hyper rational. Some of us become super controlling and a number of other things. But when the worst version of you shows up, what does that look like? How do you want to change that? How does that get in your way of accomplishing the goals that you want to have? So, pillar one, get really aware about what your challenges are and what opportunities for growth there are. And then look at your strengths. What are you really good at? What do you love doing? And from that place of self-awareness and knowing when the types of things where the worst version of you shows up, how do you change that? What do you do? The second pillar is relational transparency. And that means you are sharing in an appropriate way. You are being real about who you are. Now, I get for a lot of people, it is not necessarily safe to show up in your workplace fully and authentically yourself. But when you are able to do that, if you can create a connection with people by sharing the pieces of yourself that are important, not in a way that allows people to weaponize those things against you, right? You become more approachable. You become someone that people will trust and go to because you have shown up and demonstrated that you are trustworthy. So you are self-aware, you know who you are, what you stand for, what your triggers are. Now you've taken that from that place of awareness, you've decided what pieces of yourself are appropriate and safe to share as a leader. And then you get into the next pillar is balanced processing. How do you deal with the challenges that come up? It is okay to say, to be vulnerable, to be real. The biggest myth that women leaders have taken on is that we are superstars and we can do it all ourselves. That is not a strength, that is a weakness. Asking for help is the biggest flex you can make. Know your limits. You do not do yourself or anyone on your team any good when you are out of balance, when you are too much at home, too much at work. And there are going to be ebbs and flows, and there are going to be times when one has to take priority over the other. But to the more you can get to a position of balance, the more you are going to be able to show up as an authentic leader. If you have an interest outside of work, and I hope we all have interests outside of work and things and people that we are passionate about, normalize, I'm leaving to pursue something outside of work. And not in the sense of, oh, I'm going to take care of kids or I'm going to take care of a sick family member. We all have, a lot of us have those responsibilities. But a lot of us also want to go play pickleball or go to yoga or volunteer with churches or other organizations that mean something to us. Those are all equally valid pursuits outside of the workplace. And when you normalize saying, I am unavailable without over explaining, you are demonstrating and leading for your team that it is okay to be a fully formed person outside of the office. And then the last pillar is your internalized moral perspective. This is what I like to think of as that gut check. Now, each of us has a sense of right and wrong that has been developed because of our lived experiences and how we got there. And there may be many times when you and your team are going to be in alignment on right and wrong or the best way to proceed. But sometimes the way we've always envisioned something or always believed about something, that we could be off. We could have a skewed view. So again, coming back to that balanced processing piece and your self-awareness, am I reacting to this situation in this moment, or am I reacting to something that happened a long time ago that the person who has brought this up has no idea? So just keep that gut check in mind and use it as a guide for when you might need to take a deeper look and where you want to go. So again, we talked about a lot of this, right? Understand your strengths, your values, your leadership style. What drives you? What are the things that are non-negotiable? For me, when my son was younger, it was being able to have the flexibility to attend the things that were important to him. And, when I first had him, I worked for a state agency. And I had a big office and we had on-site daycare, which was both a blessing and a curse. If I had meetings any place other than headquarters, it was not really convenient because headquarters was 45 minutes from my house and I wasn't going to drive there and then back. But I also had a big enough office and I had a boss who had a penchant for end of the day meetings. And I threw a pack and play in my office. And he walked in the one day and he said, "What the hell is that?" I said, "That's your guarantee that you get to have meetings with me at 5:30 when the daycare center is closing and I know you want to talk about things." And he looked at me and he said, "Oh." And he turned around and he walked out of my office. Now, not everybody has that ability, and I get that that comes from a huge place of privilege, that I was able to say that to him, that I had a boss who was supportive, that I was in a position that I knew he valued what I did, so I could do that. But my point in telling you that story is, don't take yourself out of the running. If there is something you need, know the value you bring to your organization, and don't be afraid to say, "This is what I am doing." Don't ask permission. This is what I am doing. And this is how I am going to address your concerns about that, right? Have a backup plan. Now, maybe I would have thought about it differently in terms of how I presented it. But again, so know your audience, know how to say that, but what are your non-negotiables? Start your day, your week, your monthly, annual planning with those. Here are the things that cannot move. Maybe it's you're going to a wedding or a family reunion or the big pickleball tournament that's nationwide. Your sorry, right? If you know that that is on the calendar and that those things are on the schedule, those are your non-negotiables for that time period. I am not available during this time. Again, be polite, be firm, don't over explain. And when you take the time for self-reflection and seeking feedback from other people about how you are showing up and how they are receiving the message that you are giving, you can continue to refine the message that you deliver and how that gets there. So what are the barriers? What stops us from showing up as our most authentic selves? Well, there's that, classic double bind. As women, you need to be assertive, but we're still expected to be likable. And the statistics are still overwhelming that women get spoken to about their attitude far more than men in performance reviews. So find a way to continue to be firm and professional and push back when somebody talks about, well, you were this or you were that in some type of negative connotation because you stood your ground. Find ways to challenge that assumption and question where that belief is coming from that person. The biggest barrier is often imposter syndrome. Everybody on this call is accomplished. And I am willing to bet that every one of us on this call at some point has had a thing saying, oh my God, everybody's going to find out that I really don't know what I'm talking about. Stop that. You are where you are because of your hard work, because of the education and experience that you have developed over your career. You know why people don't understand and why you're like, well, this was easy. It's easy because you worked to make it look easy. You know what you are doing. That doesn't mean you don't keep growing and learning. We are not going to be experts at everything the minute we start them. But again, get realistic and give yourself a little more credit than you probably are. We are constantly navigating bias. If we have children, we're getting the bias about, oh, she's going to be unreliable because she's going to take off the minute something happens to her kids. If we don't have children, people are like, oh, well, why doesn't she have any kids? Like, what's the matter with her? And then when you get into all of the discrete characteristics that people have, right? The bias of anytime you are in a room with someone who does not look like you for whatever reason. Are they a different race, different gender, different ethnicity, right? There's a bias that goes along with all of those things, and women are constantly navigating that. And sometimes instead of just a bias, it's lack of experience with different values, expectations, and communication styles. So one way to be really authentic is to solicit feedback from those you have to deal with. Ask, how would you like me to communicate with you? If I need to, discuss things that are problematic, how should I do that? Do you like written feedback? Do you want to have periodic meetings? Right? But the more you don't let other people's opinions of you sway you from showing up as your highest and best self, the more effectively you will lead. Because instinctively, we have all been in situations where people's words and actions do not align. And even if it appears on the surface that they align, that little voice that's inside of all of us is saying, something's not right about this. Listen to that more, right? Are you being fueled to not be true to yourself? Is something pushing up against a value for you? So the other piece of staying authentic and the relational transparency, when you are able to share pieces of yourself as a way to make connection with your team, you get better at setting boundaries while still being approachable. If your team knows that you have a spin class that is at noon on Wednesdays and do not schedule any meetings, that is what I'm doing on my lunch hour. This is a hard stop. This is non-negotiable for me. I need to go to this spin class. It's what I need and want. And I am not going to accept any means. You allow your team the freedom to also be able to set reasonable boundaries to get to what interests them the most. When you deal with somebody and you can tell that one or both of you is in a heightened emotional state, you can validate the emotions without agreeing with the negativity, right? We all have that one coworker who just wants to complain about everybody else. When they come to you and say, I can't believe that this place did that again, and that heavy sigh and all of that, I can really tell that you're struggling with this and this is really bothering you. How can I best support you in the moment? As opposed to, yeah, you're right. This place just has no idea what's going on and everybody here is just awful, right? Because when you agree with that negativity instead of just validating the emotions of how somebody's feeling, you allow that to expand. And then you're both in this negativity spiral instead of when you say, I can see you are really bothered by this. I can see you're really angry, upset, hurt, whatever the emotion is. When you name it, it allows it to be addressed and put into its proper place. So it's acknowledged, but then you move on and don't get stuck there. I can't say this enough, right? When you are open and vulnerable, it builds trust. And it goes into fostering meaningful communications because you are perceived, because you are someone who is trustworthy. Informed, fair, ethical decisions. Encourage diverse perspectives in leadership. If you notice that there are people on your team whose input you are not getting, ask them about it. Hey, I haven't heard from you. I'd really like to know what you think about this. And create those spaces where people can challenge the conventional norms, where you deliberately solicit ideas from people who you know are not going to agree with you, right? Don't be afraid to say, hey, I'd really like to know what so-and-so says about this. Because again, the more you allow for things to be inclusive, the more people will speak up, the more good information you will get, the stronger your team will get. And I know this is hard sometimes. How do you stay objective when you are under pressure? This is going to circle back around to that self-awareness. When you know what your triggers are, or you are in a particularly heightened state of emotion, being able to name that and say, if somebody's coming to talk to you about something and you had a bad day, right? It was one of those days and everything went wrong on your drive into work, and you show up at work and you are frustrated beyond belief because you caught every stoplight, your coffee spilled, whatever it was, right? It's okay to take a minute. I know this is really important to you. I want to give you the attention it deserves. I'm not in a place to be able to be fully present with you right now. Can we schedule this for later? But, and make a time. Let's schedule this for 2:00. Give yourself some time, right? Again, it's not always possible to do that because sometimes people need an answer right then, and you are the only person who can do that. So again, try and find a way. Okay, just give me a minute, right? Let me just go grab a cup of coffee before we start this conversation. Take a walk, go grab that cup of coffee, right? And just take a couple of deep breaths, come back, have that conversation, but recognize when you need to dial down just a little bit. So taking all of these things together, how do we lead with purpose and influence? What is your leadership purpose? What are you trying to accomplish? Start with your own personal mission, vision, and values. because then you will inspire and empower others because you are very clear about what you want to accomplish, where you are going, what your purpose is. And align your personal values with your professional goals. So practical strategies, develop a growth mindset, build a support network and mentorship circles, find other really smart women that you admire and men too, and actively have high-level conversations, actively ask about the things that you want to do, and prioritize your self-care and resilience as a leader. So here's my call to action. And then I think, Ginger, we can open it up if anybody has any questions, right? I want you to reflect your takeaways. What is one leadership trait you want to embrace more? Once you've decided that, find an accountability partner. Discuss the key takeaways with somebody. Commit to it. Write down one leadership action you can implement immediately. Control your environment. Use your calendar to block out the time for the things that are important to you. And most importantly, regularly reassess and adjust. So with that, I will turn it over to Ginger to see if we have any questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Michelle. And please, everyone, keep those questions coming to the chat. And I'll wait just 1 second while everyone enters those questions into the chat. All right, well, we'll go for our first question from Felicia. And she says, what if I made a mistake as a leader? How can I build trust?
Felicia, that is a great question. We all make mistakes. The first thing to do, acknowledge that you didn't get it right. Apologize. And a true heartfelt apology, not where you are berating yourself and beating yourself up, right? Hey, I really missed the mark on this. I'm sorry. Can we talk about ways that we can improve this in the future? If it's something that you made a mistake and you know how to fix it, acknowledge that too, right? If the mistake is something that went to your boss, right? Going to your boss, hey boss, I really messed this up, but I've taken a second look at it and I believe I found a solution. The solution I think we should do is how, is XYZ. What do you think about that? Can we talk about that? And that's how you build trust, because people know then that if you say, hey, this is right, this is done, everything's there, because you have ironically, because you have acknowledged that you messed up before and you took ownership of it and you worked collaboratively to find a way to fix the problem, you will absolutely have more trust from people.
All right, well, we have a few more questions that have come in. Our next one was from Monica, and she says, how can I lead with empathy?
So Monica, leading with empathy, it's about acknowledgement. People want to be seen and heard. Empathy doesn't mean being a pushover. It doesn't mean that you have to buy every sob story. Hey, I'm really sorry that happened to you. I can tell you're upset. However, the team still needs you to do X, Y, Z. And sometimes if you have somebody that is always in that victim role and always expects sympathy, not empathy from other people, or they use it as an excuse, sometimes that's a different conversation. And that conversation is, hey, it doesn't seem like this job is a good fit for you with the other things you have going on in your life. Let's have a conversation about that. But really, it's about actively listening. When people are talking to you, absorb the information. Don't immediately be thinking about what you want your response be. your response to be, and then reflect back to people. What I heard you say was, and then move from there.
That's great advice. Thank you. All right, our next question from Marianne says, how can you be authentic when the team members you are managing are not authentic or disengaged?
Marianne, that is a tough situation to be in. And it starts, I'm going to take the disengaged part of that first. Why are they disengaged? What has happened to get them to be there? If you can get to the root of why they are disengaged, you might be able to get into a better place with them. And when I talk about being authentic, if you know that the people you are working, that your team members are fundamentally unhappy and untrustworthy, you need to protect your peace. So in that situation, you being authentic is, this is what my role is in this company. These are the things that I have to get done. These are the standards I am going to set. And how do I protect myself and put boundaries, right? But protect yourself. If you have done the things to try to change them, right? The only way you can hope to have some impact, and there are some people who are resistant to change, and if they are locked into being unhappy and untrustworthy, honestly, there's not a whole lot you're going to be able to do about that. But you start showing up differently. When they try to draw you into these petty conflicts or being unhappy, I hear what you're saying. That sounds like you're in a really tough spot right now. And then detach. And don't get drawn into agreeing with or agreeing to do something else to get them there. So it really somewhat is about protecting your peace and detachment and doing what you can to demonstrate. And sometimes if you do that enough, right, sometimes people will change a little bit. Sometimes if you continue doing it and it's really pushing buttons for them, they might find their way to someplace else. And then you have new team members to integrate into the process and do something different with. But it's really about you just keep showing up and a little bit detached and unflappable. And I get that what I'm saying is so much harder to do, to put into practice. So step by step, little pieces. What's one thing with those people who are being untrustworthy and unhappy and disengaged? What's one thing you could do differently? And start small, right? You don't have to take on the whole thing at once. Start small. One thing, see if you get some small changes from that. Then add another piece.
Well said. Thank you. I think we have time for one final question. Then we'll ask you for last thoughts. And Abigail says, how can I be vulnerable without being a pushover? I worry people will take advantage of my kindness.
Yeah, Abigail, that is so often the case that people do mistake kindness for weakness. So when I think about vulnerability, it's about, for me, it's about sharing just enough in a way that you still control the narrative. So for example, if you are feeling that you are being taken advantage of because you're really good at what you do and you've become the office fix-it, and people continue to keep dumping things on you, you can still be kind when you say, hey, I appreciate that you asked me to help take on this project. Unfortunately, I am at capacity right now. I don't, I just don't have the time to do it. I'm not able to. I need to get other things done. So it's about boundaries. It's about saying no to things that don't serve you, don't bring you joy. There's a great book by Sara Mason called The Life-Changing Magic of Not Giving an F. And she basically walks you through some exercises on how to essentially Marie Kondo your life. What are the things you need to do? And start there. Okay. And I mean need, I mean I don't mean stuff that has dumped on you because you think you should, right? What are the things that absolutely need to be done in my life? And then when you've identified those things, do you have to be the one to do them? And if you don't have to be the one to do them, who can you delegate them to? Or how can you, so delegate if you can. If you have to do it, is there a way for you to automate that? That automate those things to free up the time? And, what it gets down to is if there is something that you don't want to do. So, for example, you've been involved with a particular charity or organization, and they just you enjoyed it when you started, but now it's just gotten to be too much of a time suck and you're losing interest. Or you have to, go to that family member's birthday party that you really don't get along with, right? I'm really sorry, I'm sorry I'm not available. End of story. And people will push. And the people who step over your boundaries the most are the people who are going to have the worst reaction when you start holding to them. And some of it is, I'm just not available. But why? I'm just not available. I just can't do it, right? Because if you give them an answer about I'm not available because I'm going to X, or, oh, well, what about next Saturday? Right? Hey, do you want to go grab a cup of coffee this Saturday? Oh, I can't. I'm already busy. Oh, well, how about next Saturday? Well, the answer really is I don't ever want to grab a cup of coffee with you if you're the last person on earth. Right? And you don't want to have to get to that. But the more you just say, oh, I'm not available, right? But take some of the control back. I'm not available. Let me get back to you with a date that works. And then you just quietly don't get back to them. And it takes time. And it takes effort. And think about the areas. Kate Donovan talks a lot about resentment as your superpower. She has a great podcast. And she talks about resentment as your superpower. What are the things you are feeling most resentful about? Because that's where sometimes when we feel like we're being a pushover, it's that we're not necessarily mad at the other person. We're mad at ourselves for feeling, for agreeing to do something that we didn't really want to do. And you just have to give it back to them, right? If you think about you're carrying a backpack as you're walking up the mountain, why are you letting other people walk up hands-free while they keep putting rocks into your backpack? And if you picture that visual or some other visual that works for you, if that one doesn't resonate, right? What are people putting on you because you've been kind in the past, but they're not thinking about you? How do you say, no, sorry, no, my hands are not open to receive that. The backpack is closed. So that's how you do it. It's just sometimes, and sometimes it just has to be, I just can't. And unfortunately, there are people who will try to take advantage of people's kindness. And that's a them issue. Again, there are people that, I know who have made bad decisions. And while I empathize and feel bad for the situation that they are in, it is not my problem to solve. So the things that where Abigail, where you feel people are taking advantage of you, is it really your problem to solve? And if it's not, you just need to start chucking those rocks out of the backpack and keep walking up the mountain to get where you need to, because they are not going to do it for you. And it's really that simple. It's about getting clear about who and what is important to you, and why are you, and I have done this myself, right? Sometimes you get caught up and you want approval or something, right? Attention or whatever you want to call it from somebody. And you're like, I don't even like this person or respect this person. Why am I spending all this energy doing that? And then when you stop, and they may act up because you've set boundaries, but you stop and then you realize how much more free you feel. And it's really about choosing yourself first. And that is not selfish. That is, you cannot be good for anybody else. You have to choose yourself first. Why? Why is the time to go get a mani and a pedi? Why is that not as sacred? Why is that any less important than any of the other things you think you should be doing? And that's really what, and you just have to keep reminding yourself every day, I am important. My needs are important. I need to look at myself first. And it's not selfish. And no, I'm not doing that because I just don't want to. And again, and then you find a nice way to say that. Or if somebody's really a problem, sometimes you have to say, look, we're acquaintances, and the, X number of times a year I see you at whatever event really is enough for me. And they won't be happy about that, and it doesn't necessarily feel good. But why are you letting what somebody else wants disturb your peace?
Well, Michelle, that is fantastic. Well, before we wrap, do you have any final words of wisdom for our viewers today?
No, I mean, thank you all for great questions. I really do appreciate that. And I will drop my LinkedIn in the chat. And if you want to stay connected and continue the conversation, please feel free to do so. And thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.